Okay, since this is a meet, we're gonna get, and not a meeting. As an annual type, that was last June, we don't have any reports from anybody, I'm not gonna worry about it. Greg will have an announcement later about why the blue boxes are standing back here. I'll have a little bit later as well. But other than that, let's just get underway.
All right, so it's the Greg Baker Show today. Since our person who was gonna present ended up being busy, so I think Bob's gonna do October. I think is the plan, is that what he said?
I think so.
Yeah, so he's got one on his helix and on his layout, I think he's gonna do. It might actually be able to go over there and look at his layout too, so stick around for October. So I've got two presentations today. The first one is about adding interlocking. What is an interlocking? Just kind of what system that is used by railroads to get trains to cross each other, trains in certain areas. And pretty high level view. I'm not going to go into the weeds, but I am building a layout that is going to feature interlockings, and currently working through some stuff at the Clackamas Club on looking at adding an interlocking tower to an area. So we'll go ahead and get started on that. And once this is done, we'll take a little break. And then I've got a presentation on doing some water, adding water to your monorail. So, wakey. Hello. Well, now it's on. Close. Lights on. All right.
Sure which ones did that.
Okay, it's back to me. All right, so just a quick introduction about what we're gonna go over. So we're gonna talk about what is an interlocking, incorporating interlockings into your layout, what I'm doing to incorporate interlockings. So on my layout, I'm gonna incorporate Willamette Bridge, crossing the Willamette River, the Columbia River, and Portland Junction. So my layout's gonna be pretty involved with interlockings. And then we'll open it up for questions and answers. So before I worked at Amtrak, which I currently work at Amtrak now, I worked for TriMet. And before I worked for TriMet, I worked for Watco companies, and I was a safety manager. So I got to travel around the country and read people railroad rules. So you get to read things like this. An interlocking, according to the definition out of my 1967 Consolidated Code of Operating Rules, is defined as an arrangement of signals and signal appliances so interconnected that their movements must succeed each other in proper sequence and for which interlocking rules are in effect. It may be operated manually or automatically. There you go. That's what an interlocking is. Got that? All right, now in English. So it's a section of railroad that is controlled using signals that protect something. All right, that's all you gotta know. Just a section of railroad uses its own signals to protect a specific area of the rail. So things like junctions, track comes in, you have a subdivision that comes in, there's a switch there, it's protected. You don't just let people just open and close the switch. You have to have somebody let you in there. Crossings at grade. So where two tracks cross over each other. You don't want people to just, fly through there at a high rate of speed and figure it out and meet in the middle and make a big mess. And the other common one, especially around here, was bridges. So bridges are also considered an interlocking because you don't want to go off the end of a bridge. Locomotives don't do well in water. So in order for one route to be selected, there not be a conflicting movement. So a bridge can't be up, boat can't be going under, right? Bridge has to be down. Even when you have a multiple track interlocking, you can't have, the system will not allow you to pull the levers and cross tracks with each other. You have to have a clear path. You can have multiple trains running through an interlocking, but it won't let you because of that interlocking system. See, railroads are really good about naming stuff. They go, hey, what does that do? And then they name it that. So interlocking can be very, very complex. So this is, I believe in Chicago. These are all the areas that they control as it goes to the station. All of these levers select a route or multiple routes. So there's lots of people that work in there, lots of people pulling levers. It's very, very confusing. And the reason that you have it set up as an interlocking is so that you have a reduction in errors. You can't line two trains to cross over into each other. So That's how those are set up. So they can consist of multiple tracks, multiple signals, many complex routings, or they can be relatively simple. This is North Portland Junction. So you've got, this is the SP&S main line. This is the UP. Crossed over here, they can go up to that industrial section. Currently UP is working to make this, they're putting in a huge switch here, one of those swing point frogs. And they're gonna make it so they don't do 20 miles an hour, they'll do like 50 through there to get the trains cleared out. And then this is the, I think it's the Peninsula Railroad. Anyways, this goes down to another little railroad, actually go down here and then actually under the track, and then we've got some industrial trackage up there. So the Expo Center, for reference, is like right here. So that's where you're at in the Portland. So this is one of the things I am going to include in my layout is a version of this. So as you can see, it's set up with the switches. So you have, your switches, normal and reverse, and then your signals. So this at the time was right-hand running, meaning everything was set up for you to be on the right hand, and all the signals were set up for you to be on the right hand, and you just followed along. It was all ABS. Now it's all double track CTC. So you go either direction, and the computer in Dallas, Fort Worth, wherever it's at, chooses the routes for all the trains and does a splendid job of not accounting for anything and causing train delays and all the things. So this one, for example, only would be relatively simple, only a few routes, small number of signals, small number of turnouts or control devices. So interlockings can be standalone, meaning you could be out in the middle of nowhere. We know where this is at. And further, go to Klamath Falls and keep going. This is where the Modoc line crosses the inside gateway. So this is out in the middle of nowhere. Neither of those lines were ever signaled. So you'd have an interlocking though, because you don't just want the BN and the SP to meet in the middle of the night, head on somewhere.
You want questions along the way or save them to the end?
If you got one, you can go ahead.
The Chicago interlocking had levers for routes. The last one for North Portland had levers for signals and switches. So they don't have to be connected in terms of the interlocking?
They don't. So this setup is going to be, you will pull like, so every signal system, there used to be 30 manufacturers of signals. Like Pennsylvania Railroad made all their own signals. New York Central made their own signals. There was GR&S. There's they just go on and on. So every company had their own way of doing things. So essentially, it's like, are you buying a Ford? Are you buying a Chevy? Are you buying a Toyota? They all do the same things, but they're set up differently. You'd have these replaced like the old strong arm levers. So you see in a lot of the old classic towers where they literally had to grab the top of the thing and pull it back because you were physically moving rods to physically move signals. Those are all electromagnetic. So you're pulling it out, it's going through relays, it's sending signals down the track, it's saying, hey, throw this switch. Then you're going to pull another lever and that'll be setting up your signals.
So in North Portland, can they set up a switch that's incompatible with the signal?
So these will lock out. So if you've got, if you try to throw these in the wrong sequence, it won't let you select the route. So it's, so you have most of these, and I think I know the photo, there's a little kind of cheat sheet most of these have. And it's like to line a train off the UP regular running, you want to go this way. And if you're lining a train off the UP to cross over and go back onto the UP, so if they're southbound or they're westbound, they would have to cross over. So you can't just be like, oh, I'm gonna throw this switch and that switch and see what I can do. So it'll lock you out of an improper route. And you can screw them up, like, and then they just don't do anything, and then you're in trouble. So interlockings should be standalone. So this essentially would be, there would be a signal a mile before this. Be a fixed aspect with just a little yellow light or a yellow board, or like out in Kansas, they just literally take an old semaphore, paint it yellow, and screw it to a piece of wood. And that was the distance signal. And it's essentially telling you, hey, in about a mile, there's a signal that you might have to stop for. So this is your warning when you come to the home signal or the governing signal, which is this. You have to react to this. Now, this has 3 lenses on it. Guarantee you one of those is blacked out. It's going to be green or it's going to be red. You got 2 choices. You either can go or you stop. So right now it's set to a stop signal. It's set to a stop signal. Now, if it's set to a stop signal, you're going to walk out there, walk up to the box, open the box, follow the little instructions inside. But these are used on, they're kind of all over the place, but an automatic interlocking like this, it's just to usually protect tracks or railroads crossing over each other. So not tied to any other signal. Most common are bridges, crossings of grade, things like that. So a lot of the bridges on the Coos Bay line, you'd have a signal, which is literally just a post with a yellow thing on it. And then you'd have to come up to the bridge, stop, and then follow the instructions on the bridge. So depending on who has authority, who built there first. So some bridges are always set for rail traffic, some bridges are always set for river traffic. So if you go out on the A line, all the bridges are always open. So somebody had to go out there and open all those bridges before the train showed up. And sometimes they didn't get there. So again, they consist of an distance signal. So that's the semaphore or fixed yellow light or something about a mile beforehand, and then the home signal. That's it. Very simple. Then you can get into things like Will Bridge, which is double track ABS directional running, but they slap interlockings in between it. So the signal system is tied in with the interlocking. So it's common on ABS, CTC. There's other types of interlocking. So if you're like a Pennsylvania Railroad fan, they predate like centralized traffic control. They'd have cabins, and a cabin would have a certain section of railroad, and then the next cabin would have the next section, the next section, so on. So each section was ran by a separate person or a separate, essentially, controller, an interlocking tower operator. And they were all tied together, just butted up against each other. So that's one way of doing it. It's very, very labor intensive because you have to hire 3 shifts of people plus a relief. You have to have someone in those towers 24 hours a day, 365 days a year if you want to move trains. And if you got one every, sometimes even every 2 miles, because you've got that much, stuff, it's very expensive. So interlockings the interlocking limits are separate from controlled track. So if you have a dispatcher in Omaha, Nebraska, and you have an interlocking at, let's say, well, let's use so we'll use Steel Bridge. So the dispatcher that operates the track across the Steel Bridge is in Omaha, Nebraska. Who controls the bridge, Steel Bridge?
Somebody in Borland.
There is a Union Pacific employee that sits in that bridge all day long and pushes buttons to make the bridge go up and the bridge go down. That is his section of railroad. He's in communication with the dispatcher, but the dispatcher can't tell him, I'm running a train through there. And he can say, you can try all you want, but the bridge is up and there's a barge. So they can
go fast.
So, woo, 88 miles, no, that's something else. So you can have them in the middle of a section of CTC. All the signals leading into there are CTC. But if the bridge tender flips all of his stuff to red, it's going to cascade the signals out to give everybody a yellow coming in. So it's interlocked, automatically going to give you a signal that tells you, hey, slow down. The next signals might not be a signal you want. It might need to be on the brakes. So But then you can't have a dispatcher, unless they're in charge of that interlocking, do anything about it. They can sit there and scream and yell on the phone all they want. They can yell at the crew, they can, throw rocks, doesn't matter. The interlocking, and whoever has control of that interlocking, that's their railroad, that's their piece of the railroad. There's nothing you can do about it. It's really tricky when that guy doesn't answer the phone, there's a power outage, guy walks off the job. All things that have happened on the railroad. All right, so there's two main types of interlocking, automatic and manual. Automatic essentially just means that there's nobody there. Whoever gets there first gets the signal. So you roll up, you get into the circuit goes, hey, look, a train, cool. What shall I do? Well, it'll check all the other routes. And if it's clear, gives you a clear signal and you just go on through. If there's anything else in that circuit, like another train or a broken rail or, thieves who run off with bits of copper, you get a red signal. So at an automatic interlocking, you're going to get a red signal, and either probably in this little hut right here, there's a little box. Walk down there, take out your switch keys, you open up the box, fling it open, and there's a set of instructions. And it'll be like, press and hold the green button for 30 seconds. Wait till the light illuminates. If the lights do not illuminate, press and hold the button for a minute. And it's like, if the lights still do not illuminate, flag crossing, proceed with caution. All right. So you literally just follow the instructions in the box. And there'll be one for each railroad. So the BN would have a box with their key and their lock and their instructions. And the SP would have their own. The SP key, SP lock, open up. Their instructions might be different. Might say, stand on left foot, sing birthday song backwards. I don't know, whatever they want to put in. So it doesn't matter. It's their instructions. So the only time that you don't have to do all the button pushing is if two trains get there right at the same time. You get out, you talk to the crew, you can like flip a coin or tell me buy them a drink later or whatever, and you just one of you picks to go first. Usually the one that's either the shorter train or the faster train. So if you got 30 cars and they have 130, you'll probably try to convince them that, hey, let me let me get through here. I don't want to sit here in the snowstorm. You can wait. So, signals actuates on first come, first served basis. And again, rules are in the box. So if it's not an automatic interlocker, that means you have to physically talk to someone or someone's in the tower. So this is the Willamette Bridge train order office, but it was also part of the interlocking system. So not only did they hoop up orders for trains going out on the A line, they had like a crossover and one switch they had control over. That's it. Not a lot going on. But you actually had to talk to someone, or someone had to be in contact with the dispatcher to run that route. So it's either operated inside the interlocking tower or is operated remotely from a dispatching center. So you have certain locations that there's still somebody that you still have to talk to them to get across. So when I was working for the KNO, we'd pull up on the BN main line in Hutchinson, Kansas. I would have to call the BNSF dispatcher to cross the train tracks. And they'd say, yep, here comes your signal. Or nope, we've got 16 trains, put up your feet, have a nice day. So depends on what's going on. But the fact is there has to be a communication with someone, and there's someone physically controlling those switches. So interlocking signals themselves are the fixed signals. So you don't just have signs, you don't just have somebody out there waving a flag, things like that. You have to have signals that give you some sort of information that aren't going to move. Every time you run the route, someone hasn't moved the signal on. Fixed signals there for your protection. So permanent signals display aspects to indicate when it is safe to proceed. So the train's clearly safe to proceed there, and when it is not. All right. So don't have your signal, the bridge is up, things get wet, people get upset. Some people might have to, go work with doctors. All right, so what? Cool. Talked a lot about interlocking, but what's the point? So what I'm doing and what you can do is adding an interlocking to your model railroad. So there's a few things that I think are kind of interesting. So, hey, familiar? So interlocking adds scenic interest. They're kind of cool looking. Like if you look at pictures of trains and if you go, in the Steinheimer photos or any of the interlocking towers are in tape. Most towns, no matter how small, usually had some sort of interlocking at some point in their history. So they look cool. They can help set the era and place of your layout. So, like if you're modeling the Pennsylvania Railroad, you'd have to have all these cabins. So even if you're modeling modern Norfolk Southern, you'd still have to have those buildings because they made them out of, I don't know, like industrial concrete and brick, and it takes tons of dynamite blowing up. So they just leave them, but they got all the windows boarded up. So you can walk to your layout and go, well, I know I'm somewhere along the Pennsylvania Railroad because there's a Pennsylvania Railroad structure. And I can tell you it's not being used because all the windows are boarded up and there's vines growing over it and there's graffiti all over it. Or you see something like this where, the towers, all the glass is nice and clean. There's a little guy in there, the light's on. Oh, look, it's an interlocking. So you've got some visual interest. Usually there's some sort of interesting trackage that goes along with an interlocking. You usually have crossovers. You've got crossings at grade. So when you put that onto your model railroad, it's kind of a cool looking scene. They're very railroady looking scenes. Yeah, cool. You got a track out in the middle of nowhere. It's got 1 or 2 signals on it. Great. But you've got 6 tracks crossing 3 tracks, and there's diamonds and switches and signals. They look pretty cool. They're fun. Good to have on your railroad. So operations wise, and including an interlocking, you can slow down the operations. So even if you don't model the railroad that's crossing your railroad, even if you just added, you got a 18-inch wide shelf, and you just add a track that comes out of the backdrop and goes across your layout and stops, but you put the distance signals and the home signals, and you're cruising along, and you have Jeff write you a little program that randomly, when it goes into the circuit, it turns it red. And then you have to walk over to the little panel on the front and open the panel and read the instructions and push the button. You've added some interest to your layout. You've added a little feature that you can include in your operations. And it doesn't make it boring, because now you're like, oh, cool, I have to look at these lights and I have to follow these instructions and push this button. People like pushing buttons. I have a daughter, she loves pushing buttons, usually mine. So they can add additional jobs to the layout. So if it's complex enough, a large enough layout, I've switched on a layout in Kansas City. Huge layout. He does the Frisco and the Mod. And there's a job on the layout where I think it's a 4-track, and then a 3-track, and there's a Y. And they all cross over, and he had the little strong arm handles. And he had to sit there and read the routes, and the trains would come in and say, hey, I'm to Santa Fe, and I need to go to this yard. And there'd be Santa Fe, and then it would tell you the yard, and you'd have to pull all the blue levers. And then that would line up the train that way. Then the UP would come through. It's like, hey, I'm the UP, I'm going to this yard. You go, put all the blue levers back, and pull all the yellow levers. That's a full-time job on this layout. And if you didn't have that, you can't run through that section of layout. It's a huge section of layout. It can add additional railroads to your layout. So if you really like a certain railroad and you kind of like another railroad and you can find where they cross, now you can buy a couple locomotives and a caboose and have it sitting there, and or have a junction that ties into your railroad. Maybe they come into your railroad through an interlocking, run down the main for a little bit, make a transfer, and then run back off the layout using that interlock. So it's a real world connection. It makes your layout seem bigger than it is. So getting those, what happens at the edge of the layout? There's a whole world out there. This allows you to make your layout bigger. So what I'm doing is this little layout that I better start building fast, because Joe wants me to make videos about it and sell them on, or put them on NMRA or Masters TV. So I got to get doing on this. So I'm modeling an HO scale. I've converted a single car garage 11 foot by 14 foot, modeling the SB&S, GN, NP, UP in 1968. It's gonna be a scenic top deck, and then this track here and this track here drop down to a hidden staging yard. Pretty simple. Digitrax DCC, and it'll be ABS double track signals. So right hand running, like lights green, you go, yellow, slow, red, stop. So the first thing I'm gonna have is, well, second one. So this area right here, this is Willbridge Yard. This is where the refineries are at. This is Willamette River, St. John's, Columbia River, Vancouver. So Willbridge here connects over here, and this actually drops down grade and will connect to my hidden staging also. So I can generate trains for the A line. So connection to 6 up. So this allows me to connect trains from the upper and lower deck to go down to my Astoria or out to Astoria or come back from Astoria, or the line up or over Cornelius Pass. I can bring those trains in, drop them off and head back. Pre-1969, all the trains had to come into Willbridge, cut off, run around, pick up their cars, and then go to Vancouver. 1969, they finally got smart and built the other leg of the Y. So now you come off, you go up the leg of the Y, you cross over both tracks, and then you run into Vancouver and you skip the whole running around the train in Willbridge. So I wanted to add the in and out of the train, so I'm almost 68. So it consists, it's really complicated. So it consists of one crossover. So this is the home signal. It's tied into the ABS signals. This is in like 83, 84.
That's Amtrak.
Yep, Amtrak, whee! So this is the crossover here. And this is the photographer. This was, oh, I forgot who, oh, Paul Hobbs. Crossover there. And then they essentially turned around and took a picture this way. And that's the switch that leads out towards the A line. There's the home signal there. Now you see that they've got these little dwarf signals here. That is running reverse. So you could run reverse, but that essentially is a switch point indicator. It is telling you either the switch is lined for you or it's not. Yellow means it's lined to go straight. Red means no bueno. You need to stop here and talk to someone, figure out what's going on.
Where physically is the A line?
So this, like in real life? Or,
Yeah.
Okay, the A line runs from Portland all the way to Astoria.
Oh, that's the A line.
That's the A line. So this cuts off here. So this is Highway 30, St. Helens Highway. So this runs off here, goes around this hill. That's the St. John Bridge for reference. This used to be a big chemical plant. It's now a big Superfund site. And then over here somewhere, there's a switch and it takes off on like a 3% grade or some crazy crap like that.
United Junction.
At United Junction and heads up the mountain, goes up through Cornelius Pass, drops into the valley on the other side. And now you're on the other one. All right, so the other thing cool about this is not only was it an interlocking tower, it was also a train order office. So anybody going on and off to the A line onto that subdivision had to stop and they'd walk out and put up orders to you. So you've got this, I think the building, I have the plan somewhere from the GN group. Oops. The building is like 8 feet or 9 feet by 11 feet. It's like you walk in, there's a bathroom, a desk, and a heater, and that's it. Like that's.
That operator's position must have been very busy between copying orders and setting signals.
Yeah. So what? Yes and no, because they didn't. The through trains didn't have to pick up orders. But any train going off the A line would have to. So they essentially just had to make sure the signals or the switches were set for the ABS until they needed to bring a train out of Willbridge onto the A line or on the A line. But there was trains to the A line, trains to Cornelius Pass, a couple of turns that went out and worked the industrial section at like Linton. So there it was busy, but not not like some of them where you're hooping up, 100 orders a day or some crazy crap like that. All right, the next thing I'm gonna have is the Willamette Bridge. In the 80s, it was changed from the swing bridge to a vertical lift. I'm modeling that because it looks cooler. This is kind of a cool shot. So this is from the Portland Archives off the Oregon Historical Society collection. That's a SP&S RS3 and like 3 ballast cars. And this is in 1969 because that's the other leg of the Y that they added in. And they're currently trying to finish it up. So this will be also serve as, here's the bridge again, closed. And there's like a Y. So this is like 73, I think it is, 73, 74. It'll actually be when you go into my layout, there'll be a doorknob and you'll go into the layout by swinging open the swing bridge. Hey, cool, right? Now, it is going to be set up so it's going to be an actual working interlocking on my layout. So if that door is open or it's not locked in, I won't have power because I don't want trains to go, the Columbia River, I'd love to do, I think it's scaled out to be like 63 feet or something like that in HO scale. If you did the whole bridge, so
That's a long one.
that's a lot. Double track. Well, like the swing section alone, I think would be 4.5. There's some like huge monstrosity above. So as much as I'd love to have a functioning swing bridge, that's not going to happen. But I do want to have this set up where, it's a very iconic bridge, lots of pictures taken from the Vancouver depot looking at the bridge. So I want to get that kind of style and feel to it, the right colors, the right shape, things like that. The other thing I want to do is, see, that's a really long bridge. Like that's one of the plat drawings of the thing. That's huge. What I do want to do is work to have it randomly generate, river traffic. So the signals will randomly change, the little lights will flash on the bridge, like, hey, the bridge is opening. And you'll have to wait there for 30 seconds, and then the lights are flashing and signals change and you can go on. It's like, well, what's that was about? Oh, it's a boat. You gotta wait for the boats. So the last thing I'm doing is, because model railroads have limited space, I took North Portland Junction and moved it over here to the top of my layout, modified it a little bit, but it's going to be based kind of on that same function of it generates trains onto the layout and then allows me to take trains off the layout. So this track here will be on a 2% grade down below, and this track here will be on a 2% grade down below, a little tower up against the backdrop and whatnot, and that'll allow me to bring the trains on and off. I'm setting up my layout in, my plan is to set it up so it can be fully automated if I want it. So I'll have it all isolated and DCC and set up on blocks and all that stuff, so that if I want to flip on a computer and lock all my bridges and hit a button, my trains can run on a schedule. Or I can run it myself, or my kids can go in there and do that. So I want to have that as an option because I've never done anything like that, and I'm a little bit crazy. And why not? So this will function as, I'd like to put a panel here with a way to throw all those switches, but if I want to, I can flip it to the computer and the computer will figure it out itself. So North Portland Junction, another little itty bitty tiny baby structure, which are fun. Here's so this is the inside of it. And I think it was here in one of the photos. Yeah, there's a better photo of it. One of the photos, he had like a route cheat sheet on how to line the switches to get through there. But so he got his orders, he's got his phones, he's got his orders hung up here, he's got his phone or the annunciator there, and then you're looking out right on the tracks, and the track behind you leads to the industrial park down. So another, like I said, a little tiny building, so allows trains to connect in the upper and lower staging. For anybody who's a GN, NP, UP, Milwaukee Road modeler, the GN/NP archives has great drawings. You got to go to the BN section because that's who donated them. But they have 10,000 flats or something like that. And probably 5,000 or more station drawings. Most of them are like this, where it's just a crap ton of information on it, so you have to kind of figure out. It's like, it's everything you ever needed to know, but you have to figure out, where is this? It's like, I don't know what this is. So it's a little bit of archaeology to kind of figure it out. Sometimes they'll have one of the sheets and not the other. So sometimes you get like one profile of the building, sometimes you get like a, 6 sheets for one structure that's a 12 by 12 structure, and it's got the contractor's name of who did the plumbing, their contact information and the cost estimates. And sometimes you get, ones that have like giant smears through them, but they're free. Like, you don't have to be a member. There's GN, NP archive, and it's got all sorts of great stuff on it. So, questions? I know it's been a lot of stuff, but hope it's been at least slightly entertaining.
So at face value on a layout, if you had an interlocking, what would the modeler actually see when their train approach the interlocking? What's your mental model for them?
So when a train approaches an interlocking, you'd have a distance signal. So usually a fixed aspect of a yellow. So depending on how far away or how big of a layout you have, you'd have that visual interest of that signal. And then within, I don't know, 4, 6, 8, 12, 20 feet, depending on how big your layout's at, you'd have that first control signal for your whatever you have. If it's built into an existing signal system, if it's part of an ABS system, that would be something that would be spelled out in your timetable under your special instructions, and you would actually have a section called Interlockings, and it'd all be listed out in your timetable explaining where the interlocking is, how it operates.
Is the premise that every train from every direction would stop and in effect read the instructions and hit the button?
No. So optimally, trains don't stop. So when you come up to a crossing at grade, optimally, you come up, you slow down to make sure that your signals are lined up the way you are, or you go to whatever speed you're supposed to, and you proceed. In the event that there is another train or an anomaly there, you're gonna have to stop and react to that anomaly.
So an interlocking for a modeler, you would contend, needs to take account of what might stop one of the trains.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
So is it a bridge? If it's a bridge on the Siuslaw River that gets one boat every 6 years, it's probably going to be not open. If it's the Columbia River drawbridge, probably if you're doing real time, you're looking at every 35 to 40 minutes. That bridge is open and closed. I mean, it's a very active bridge. So depending on where you're at and what you're modeling, you kind of have to work your algorithms to model what mimic what you're trying to model. Now, I also don't want to sit there for 25 minutes while I wait for the bridge to open up and close, because that's boring. But that's part of model rarity. Things don't, they might leave on time, they might have some time built into their schedule, but things delay trains, things get in the way, things don't run perfectly. So
is there a criteria for the prototype as to what to include in an interlocking? For example, suppose I had 3 railroads crossing my railroad and I had a bridge. If they were spread a mile apart, I would assume the interlockings were probably 4 or 5, whatever they are. But if they were all on top of one another,
so
100 feet apart,
the last person there, last railroad there, generally has to build and maintain it.
but would the interlocking include all the crossings if
Yeah.
they were all close together?
Yeah.
They would.
So if you have, and you get more of this in like the Midwest, if you've got the Rock Island, the UP, the Frisco, all are east, they all come down and they're running parallel to each other. And then the Missouri Pacific builds a double track across them. Missouri Pacific would have to build a tower They'd have to build all the signal appliances around it. They would have to man that tower and maintain that interlocking. Because they're the last one there. You get some really funky ones where in the 1800s, the Frisco crossed the Santa Fe. So the Frisco built the tower first, and then along comes the Missouri Pacific and parallels the Santa Fe. So they knock down the Frisco tower and build a Missouri Pacific tower. And now it's Missouri Pacific's problem. And then I don't know, the Oriented Eastern, some, tiny little railroad comes out of the middle of nowhere and they want to build through there. It's like, cool, but you get to build yourself an interlocking tower. And you're in charge. So you go from a small wooden structure to a medium wooden structure to a medium, density brick structure to a giant concrete building. Like it's kind of this weird evolution of, as they, each railroad crossed, they've had to build a new structure.
Once it was built and operated, do they share maintenance costs?
Depending on the assigned agreements. So there's usually a point up to which you will maintain your track, because every railroad would have certain criteria that might be different. So if you're a 90-pound little tiny, you build a Granger line through the area, you aren't gonna, have a 130-pound or 120-pound rail just sitting around, but you're gonna have to pay for the cost of having the approaches meet whoever the largest rail is. So if it's the Santa Fe double track main line and you're gonna build over it, you have to meet their standards for that section. But beyond kind of where the diamond is, out a certain amount of footage, it would go back to being Santa Fe's responsibility. And there's a lot of times where a smaller railroad might not financially have the ability to, or have the materials. So the Santa Fe would come in there with a huge production gang and they would do all the maintenance and then they'd bill it back to the responsible railroad. Like it's really, do a whole class on railroad economics. It's really boring.
Greg, was the MoDOT crossing, who is the first railroad there?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think it was the GN came late, so I think it was the SP had that first.
What's the SP was?
Because I think they're NP signals.
Yeah, they look like it.
Yeah, so I think it was the BN, well, it's GN put it up, but GN signals. I think they're GN signals. But yeah, it was, yeah.
Well, let's say in the days of mechanical or interlocking, and you see the pictures inside the towers, and there's a row of levers, there must be 40 levers in a row. And then look outside, and there's thousands of feet of pipe going out to all the various switches. Just the engineering of the whole thing is fascinating just to look at.
Yeah,
That they're able to do it.
well, it's like a control line. I mean, it's like a control line airplane. I mean, it's so weird that like you are physically pulling this lever and it is turning these large levers and pulling these cables and moving these actuating rods that are physically throwing the switches and physically pulling the bottom or manipulating the bottom of a semaphore signal. Like you couldn't just be in there like, ooh, just hand throw them. Though you were like, you look at the photos and the guy's got his leg up on the thing and he's wrenching on it. Yeah. And then when you're not doing that, you're out oiling all that stuff and walking them and maintaining them and keeping the brush out of the way. It was not an easy job.
Is the interlocking tower south of Portland Union Station still there?
Yes. So that used to control, when there was a lot more tracks, that used to control all the tracks there.
There had to be at least 20 levers in there. I was in there once.
Yeah. Was that controlled? Because there was the 6 tracks, 6 yard track or 6 station tracks. And then there used to be the coach tracks that came off there and went where the TriMet built their east and west stub. There used to be like business car tracks there. And then there was other tracks on the other side. I think that was all controlled out of that tower. And they controlled all the way up to, was it NATO? Yeah, I think NATO. And then NATO across is all part of the interlocking for the steel bridge.
Did they control the entry into the yard where the turntable used to be?
What street?
Yeah,
No, that would have been, that's all manual. So once you got past,
so that would have been the end of the coach yard.
yeah, so this is on the other end. So they used to have like 2-track, like a business car, like UP used to park business cars down here. But that's all under.
They wouldn't dare.
Yeah. You can't park anything down there now at TriMet. They, after they derailed, they wiped out the fence. We still haven't cleaned up the fence, but UP went 2 directions on the switch, which is a bad idea. Don't do that. So. Anything else?
Totally unrelated, but you have a image by Greg Statter at the beginning of your presentation.
Uh-huh.
ESPN's Alcos at Willbridge. I actually met him, Greg Statter. He's a friend of Rob Loader's,
Okay.
one of Rodney's guys.
I try to, I borrow these out of one of my other, well, most of them are new, but I always try to give everybody their credit because I wasn't born yet. So I would have loved to take all these pictures, but can't do that when you're alive, not alive. So.
You're modeling the year after I was born.
I was born in 81, so.
I lived on the Oregon Electric main line at the time. I'm told the engineers were very familiar with me since my room is about 50 feet from there.
Why do you like transom? Yeah. All right, anybody else? Anything?
Thank you, Greg.
Yeah.
Okay, so. Couple minutes break while he reconfigures. And so socialize. Hi, guys.
Hey, Joe.
I have a bit of an announcement, and since 2 of the 3 people that are involved are actually here today, I'm going to actually announce it this time. And that is that while we don't actually have the awards completed, Craig Larson, Fred Kaiser, and Stu Cato, how do you pronounce his last name, will all be receiving the Golden Semaphore Award in recognition of their long service to the division.
Well, thank you.
We just have to get the new semaphores printed out.
Oh, okay.
Robert Letha has been working on actually making them. The plaques and whatnot, but the semaphores were 3D printing.
And I just, if I can just piggyback a little bit on what Jeff said, the way you two really took ownership of what you did at the convention was really impressive to me. It totally bought into making the convention a success. I'm personally very grateful for your leadership at the show.
Greg, it's all yours.
Can you put the slides back
Gonna
on?
kill the lights again, Joe?
Yes, please.
All right. Do I have control yet? No. There we go. All right, gonna do a little bit about modeling water, the easy way. So, discussing modeling water considerations, discuss what I refer to as my bottled water method, my imitation water, some special effects, and my canned water, which is the easy way. And we'll do a little demo, and then I'll open up for questions and answers. So, things to consider before modeling water. You mess it up, you messed it up. It's kind of a one-way street. So be very careful, be very certain of what you're going to do before you do it. Could create a real mess if not handled properly. This comes in effect when you're doing things like the 2-part pours with the Envirotex or some of the other products. It will find absolutely every tiny hole in your layout, and it'll drip down. And you have a layout underneath, it'll drip onto that. And if there's not, it'll go all the way down to the floor. And if it finds any holes, it'll just keep going like it just So you need to do a lot of prep work before you commit to doing water for most situations. It takes a lot of practice. The first couple of tries I've done with water, they're in a trash can somewhere. So don't get discouraged that if you try some different water techniques, they don't quite come out the way you want. One of the other things is I have a hard time leaving well enough alone. So when I'm in the process of doing water, I'll keep like, oh, I need to keep messing in, and you just keep messing with it, and then you've ruined it. Then you keep trying to fix it, and just keep getting worse and worse and worse. Read the instructions, follow along, leave it alone. So sometimes the things that you think are going to be huge issues later end up working themselves out if you just didn't keep poking it with a toothpick for 20 minutes. So things like that. So a little bit about some of the products I use. I won't be demoing this one, but Magic Water by Unrealistic Details. If you've not used this product before, far superior to anything that like Envirotex or any of those other two-part style of mixing waters. Runs for about $34.95 retail according to Walthers. It's 2 parts. So there's the A and the B and the cups, and you have to make sure that you get the mix right. And there's like 5 minutes of stirring, and they mean 5 minutes of stirring and all that stuff. So follow the instructions. This one is kind of neat because you can tint it with acrylic paints. So if you want to do, the blue Atlantic, you can put some blue in there and swirl it in there as you're mixing it. It'll actually take that color. If you want to do a muddy puddle somewhere, you can put brown in there and mix it, and it'll take that color. And that's a pretty good job. It has a limit of about a 1/2 inch of a pour, and it's unlimited. So you can just you do 1/2 inch, let that dry, do another 1/2 inch, let that dry, and you can just keep going and going and going. I've tried the Woodland Scenics products. I'm not a fan. I don't know what it is about their stuff. It wicks really weird. I've seen some of the color tint over time, and then price per ounce. This is a much better deal. So I'm cheap. So I'm always looking for best deal. And the other cool thing about this one, and I've not tried Woodland Scenics on it, you can put this right on pink foam. Envirotex makes a really cool science experiment, and if you lean over it, you might lay on the floor for a little bit and see like little smurfs running around. But this stuff, you can pour it just right on pink foam, and it'll sit there and level out, and it will not eat through the foam. Which I do a lot of the XPF, the pink foam, blue foam, green foam, that stuff, which is great for modeling, but gets really tricky if you're using some of these other resin-based products that'll attack that. So the other kind of old classic that I've done is not really water at all, but it's using a Hydrocal. So what I do with my Hydrocal, which is just kind of a lightweight plastic material, so that old jug there from Scenic Express retails for $14.98. You've got like a huge flat area, like you're going to model the ocean. And you don't want it to just be painted plywood. You mix that up into kind of a slurry. I use concrete dye. So you go to Lowe's or Home Depot, and they've got these little tiny things for about $8. And you put about 2 drops into that, and it will turn everything white into whatever that color is. So they've got browns and reds and blacks and grays. You can special order some yellows. You have a pink. We're going to do like the Southwest. You want some pink stuff. Anyways, it's a lot better than price per ounce. We're going back to that. Woodland Scenic sells their like tint stuff, which is just acrylic paint. Like that's all it is in those tubes. This stuff from like Quikrete is a concrete dye, so it really gets into. It doesn't take a lot, and it really gets into the color. It really saturates it. The reason I do that is we've all dropped something somewhere on our layout, or poked something, or try to put a tree in, and you get that like little miniature snowstorm that poofs out of your layout. So now you've got this white powdery dust. Well, if you have all of your plaster, all of your material not white, when you drill a hole in, you get little brown crumbs that fall out. And you just kind of don't worry about it because it's brown or black or whatever it is. So you've got a base material that isn't going to be an obnoxious like flare up. So this one, great for doing large surfaces. It takes you, so you pour out your plaster, then you paint it. So you have to paint near the shore, brown. When it's deeper, you have to do deeper. And then over the top of that, you're going to use some sort of gloss medium. So you can use the Mod Podge, the gloss. If you use matte, it'll look weird. So you need to use a gloss medium. If you go to the art store, one of the best things you can do is go and look at the whole Woodland Scenics catalog of stuff and take that to an art store. And you can buy every single thing in the Woodland Scenics catalog at an art store for half the price or double the quantity. So what Woodland Scenics does, a lot of their material, they're literally just taking stuff, buying 500 gallons of it, putting it into a jug, slapping Woodland Scenics scenery paste on it, and selling it to you. You go to the art supply store and you buy, Mod Podge, which is scenery paste. You get a big thing like this big for $4, instead of this little tiny thing for 14. So that's one of the things that I'm always kind of looking to do is figure out what the material is and buying one. I do use. I found this one. It works okay. It's really expensive for what it is. I haven't quite figured out what it is. I believe it's some sort of clear silicone caulking that they've put into a tube. But I haven't quite found the right substitute. But this is good for doing little ripples and waves and like the peaks of little waterfalls and things like that. It's easy control, comes in a bottle. For gloss, this stuff's a miracle thing. If you don't have this pledge, now every 3 years they change the name of it. So you'll see modelers talk about Future Floor Wax, Future 2, New Future with Pledge. Now it's called Pledge Revive It. It's great for doing decals. It's great for doing gloss surfaces. So if you do, if you want to model a 1955 Cadillac or something, and you want it to be just glossier than crap, you spray it with this stuff and it's going to be super shiny. For doing windows, if you're going to do windows on a model, literally just dip it in the stuff and you stick it to the back of the. So like I do titchy windows, I just dip the clear plastic in that stuff, stick it to the window, lose it right to it, and when it dries, you don't get the weird fogging. You don't get any of that. It makes a nice adhesion to it, and it looks like glass. It like fills in around the frames and stuff like that. So pretty cool stuff. So for water, it's great when you've got surfaces like on this one here. When I finished it, I wanted it a little bit more glossy. I just poured some of that and just started brushing it on. And it's just floor wax and it's acrylic. So water cleanup, good stuff. The last thing I do use for doing like my waterfalls and things like that for large surfaces is acrylic clear caulking for 358. So if you notice the Woodland Scenics water effects, which I think is pretty close to the same stuff, is $19.99 for that little tiny bottle. And for $358, you get a tube of caulking that will probably dry out before you use it all. But that's great for doing, I do it out on glass. So I'll do long strings and you can make huge waterfalls and things like that. So what I'm going to show you today is canned water, as I love to refer to it as. And this is idiot resistant. So this is a great place if you've never done water before, a great place to try something out. So this is the easy way. Mig sells this stuff direct. Tammy's has carried it before. I know Hobby or the Whistle Stop has tried to get it. COVID, yada yada yada, supply chain stuff, et cetera, et cetera. It's out there. It's about $14.99 for this little guy here. So it's not cheap, but you're paying for a product that takes little to no skill to give you a really good result. I have had this for about 2 years, and I have done 20 dioramas. And I've got about half of this left. So it a little bit goes a long way. Now, if you were doing, you know, the Battle of D-Day and the entire, you know, ocean attack at Normandy, and you're doing a 40-foot section of water, probably not the best thing to use. But if you have a little stream bed on your layout or a little area that you want to add some water effects to, you can do puddles. If you want to do after a rain, you got some wagon ruts you want to put puddles in, you just dab that stuff right in there, let it dry, and it does its job. So no mixing, no mixing, no nothing. It's just is ready to go right out of the jug. You get what you get. So this one is called Slow River Waters. They have clear, Atlantic blue, muddy river. So there's different colors, different styles, but whatever is in here, whatever the color that they sell you is kind of the color that you get. That's about the only downside. Takes a bit to control in the sense that whatever you put it on will become glossy and wet. So if you dribble it onto something, it will look glossy and wet. But it's not as bad as a liquid, like a 2-part pour, where you have to build dams and you have to make sure that the dam is sealed and you're finding holes in your layout. This stuff you can just kind of dab down to the top of the layout. And then it does take a couple of days to dry. So doing something the night before the convention, and you need to do a water scene for the diorama to be brought in, not a good idea.
So out of all these, what do you figure you're going to be using for your Columbia and Willamette rivers?
I will most likely use my Hydrocal because it's such a huge area, and the so I'll probably use Hydrocal, paint it, and then use the Mod Podge gloss, because when you put that in, you can use like a sponge, and if you sponge the surface, it'll give you those nice kind of peaks. You have to wait for it to start to set, because if you just start, as soon as you take it out of it, you start to set or start to sponge it, it'll just keep flattening itself out. So you've got to sit there and wait a little bit and then start sponging it to get those peaks. For all my little creeks and little runoffs, little drainage areas, I'll use this stuff. So, and that's kind of the other thing too with water is you want to use something that will fit the needs of what you're modeling. But this is great if you've never done any water stuff before and you just want to play around and try something out. One of these products gives you really good results. So you want to flip on the lights, I will demonstrate my material here.
Go ahead and hit the other one. Yeah.
All right. So this is about 85% done, 95% done, something like that. With this material here, not a paid advertisement, not a sponsor. With this material here, what I like to do is almost all of my scenery material and work first. So I'm going to do all of these shrubs, all of these bushes, all of these grass. So I make my own little grass tufts. And I'll just pick one of these off here, dip it into a little white glue, and then just place it somewhere. All right. So I will have placed all these little tufts previously before I use this material, because I want it to be dry. I want the glue to be dry. It's I've made the mistake of doing this and then putting this right on top of it. It'll trap the white glue underneath it. And then you got to kind of pick at it to let the glue dry. I was able to make a pinhole and essentially make enough room that the glue would dry and it turned clear, and then put a little more on top of this and it filled the hole in. But definitely make sure you're working on a dry scenery. So you just put plaster on here, or you just wet it down with a bunch of stuff. You poured a bunch of glue on it. Wait till all that's nice and dry. Give that at least 20 minutes. So this stuff smells wonderful. This one is, I don't know, it's kind of like yogurt or pudding. If you buy the paintbrush sets at Michael's or Hobby Lobby, they give you these little tiny palette knives. This is one of the things I use them for. The other thing I use them for is mixing up my sculpting mold. But just these little palette knives are great for this type of stuff because they're very narrow, a nice little point to them, and you can get them into all these little nooks and crannies. And great when you're doing this type of stuff. So with this stuff, it's pretty much just a matter of finding where you want to put it and placing it in there, and trying not to get it where it doesn't belong. So this one, I'm kind of using a little forced perspective trick here. There'll be a backdrop here. So the hill or the water kind of goes up a little bit steeper than probably would be natural. But so see how it's just kind of in there. And this is water cleanup. So if there's anything that, any spots that you've got, I hit my bridge here or something like that, I can just get a wet towel or something like that, and use that on it, clean it up. So easy a child could do it if she wasn't playing her video games.
So is it water resistant once it dries?
Yes. Yeah, my stuff, I do pretty much all water-based scenery though. So if I wet this whole thing, it's gonna probably get ruined anyways. Like, I mean, if I fell in a lake or if my sprinklers went off in my house, it'd get ruined. But when it comes to, if you spray it a little bit because you're finishing up some ballast or you wanted to add some details, you're not gonna ruin the water. So it's just a matter of just kind of getting it around each of these little things. And you find all the stuff that didn't quite get glued down. So there's a rock that decided that it didn't want to be glued. And usually you don't have to do your models upside down and backwards, but
Is it adhesive in any way? If what you were putting it on was loose, would it hold it together?
yeah. So like that rock that just came loose, I just shoved it back in there. It'll be there forever.
And it doesn't seep into the surround?
Maybe 5% seepage. So like if you put it up against an edge, it might wick just a little bit, but it isn't like a lot of materials. So a lot of like the 2-part materials go flying up the hillside. So then you've got to come back down with scenery to hide, the wet bog land up the hill. So you get a little bit of it. But for me, like this one, my little shrub here has a little bit on it, I'll leave that. Because if you get down next to the water, you got water splashing up on those rocks and then up on that grass that's growing there, so that works. But I don't like, the side of the hill to be wet.
It's gonna hold on that bridge, so. You should apply, it's not gonna just go down.
Yeah, so and you see how I'm also not making the surface flat? You can flatten it out, but what I'm trying to do is get some ripples in it. When it dries, it naturally will add some ripples to it, like it won't dry perfectly smooth, which is another great thing about it. But if you don't do something, if you don't accentuate those peaks, it doesn't look like running water. It looks like a flat stream, and I want this to be a little bit more active.
Greg, when it's new, is that having the same viscosity as what you're working with now?
Yes, this has been the same. Like I said, it's about 2 years old. I haven't noticed any. It doesn't even dry really in the jar. I've got on the outside of the jar, it's dried a little bit because I didn't clean up as best as I should. But even when it's dry, like here, it's still kind of tacky, so it still has a little bit of flexibility to it.
So there's some sort of rubberized part to it.
Yeah,
But now, as you're laying it down, or does it settle down and flatten out
a little bit.
a little bit?
So
You're trying to do a water surface, the water is more or less level one way.
So in your past applications, have you left the color of the application the way it came out of the bottle, or have you added to it?
100%. I have painted over it. So like this one here, I painted over just to see what it would do. Mixed results.
Come on, you.
It doesn't, it looks like a toxic waste dump. It does not take color well. So that's what I was saying. Like this stuff is whatever you buy out of the factory. It's kind of the color you get is the color you get.
It dries clear.
Yeah, so this one, so these three examples here, well, these two, when you come up here, it has a little bit of a green tint to it. And like I said, so they've got one that is dead clear. They've got one that is like Pacific Ocean blue. They've got one that's Atlantic Ocean blue. They've got that red, almost like the Red River of Oklahoma, like remodeling that for whatever reason. They've got one that's a brown, like a murky sludge pond looking thing.
The Willamette.
Yeah, the Willamette. So it's good for those type of apple, or those, you kind of have to find the color that matches what you're trying to model.
Which color do you use the most?
This is the only one I've actually purchased, is the Slow River Waters. It matches most of what I want to model. So, or was aiming to model when I was looking for colors. I think if I was doing, some other parts of the country, I'd definitely be looking at some different colors. I have had on order for about a year now, the clear. You can get it currently on eBay for like 3 times what the list price is, but I don't want to do that. I don't need it that bad. So I'll have to burn this. So a couple of chunks in here to get it out. And it starts to dry. I think you've got, 15-20 minutes of working time before it'll start to dry, but you've got a good probably 12 to 24 hours before you've got the actual kind of color and look of what you're going to end up with. And it's based on kind of, what's the humidity like and how much did you put on, how thick did you put it, and all that stuff. how much do you mess with it? But like, see, it's already, I mean, I can put it like that, it's not gonna run off the thing. So it makes it so that, not going anywhere. But see how I've textured it there, I've given it a little bit, some ripples and whatnot. That'll of course dry a little bit differently, but and like this one here, I've got these kind of waterfall-y things, and I'm just kind of, I'm just trying to flatten this out just to get it, these rocks wet, because I will come back in and add either this, either the scenic, these, or I'll come in and add the dab caulking and add just some little highlights on the rocks just to give me, just to make it look a little bit more. Let's see. Just making sure my creek is actually connected in between the tunnel portals. All right. That's about all you need to do with that. And now it's just a matter of kind of letting it dry and seeing kind of what happens once it dries, and I'll go back and make adjustments or add to it. Just like anything when you're doing with scenery, you can always add to it. Don't go heavy-handed the first pass, especially if it's something new. Do a little section of it, see how it looks. Don't believe what you see right here is the way it's going to look when it's done. So you want to let that sit for a little bit, make sure it's dried, make sure it's set, and then you'll go back and either add. Because sometimes like, oh, I think I got it all, and I'll come back and it'll be like a giant hole that I missed. Like I have no idea how I missed that giant hole, but I'll need to add a little bit in there. If you try to put this material on too thick, it will make little air pockets. That's the only other thing. So you got to make sure that like these areas down here, I was very careful to kind of poke at them, make sure they're touching the surface underneath. If you get the air pockets, they just pop, and then you get those little water holes. But I've sat on like this one and this one. You do a layer, then you do another layer, and then you're like, I don't like that, I'll add some more, and you keep kind of just adding. I've not had any issues with the layers adhering to each other. Of course, keep it dust free. Don't do a bunch of sanding work right over the top of it and try to put another layer of this stuff on here. But yeah, it's like I said, not the cheapest stuff in the world, but if you've never done water before and you've got a little scene like this, or you want to play around with it and add a little scenic highlight, great product to try out, play around with, and see what you come up with.
You ever used, I think it's called Water Magic from Deluxe Materials?
I have not.
It's like a single part epoxy. I'll get you a bottle of it. I've got
Okay.
a couple. Joe would probably love for you to do a video using it.
Okay, what's the source of your grass tufts there on the?
These?
Yeah.
They're homemade.
Static
Oh.
grass.
So I think I did well. So this is what happens when you have to go do job applications. You have to come up with these stupid things to carry your resume around in. So it's, I don't know how many, 5 mil, 10 mil, frosted plastic sheets that are, they fold, you put your resume in it, a little clip on the end. I cut them into these strips, and I have a shoebox, one of those plastic shoeboxes. See, I told you I was cheap, right? So you take a shoebox and you take this, and now you've created a static charged field. And if you need more static, you rub it on your head and you stick it in the box. So when these things are nice and clingy, like this is great, like you rub it on this and the static grass will stand right up. And then I just take white glue and literally just drag this back and forth, making dots. And then I throw it in my shoebox and I dump static grass in it and I shake the heck out of it. I pull the sheet out, put that over to dry, and then I take all the static grass that's left, pour it back in my bucket, do up another sheet, so on and so forth. So this one here, when it's dry, I then have got some scenery brushes and I went through and just took, got a bunch of Vallejo paints because I paint little tiny people. And I just painted some of them up. So I did some orange and some yellow, some other shades of green. This is the natural grass color. These have some brown in them, just to give you some variety.
So you're using the natural static of the material, you don't have to use a gun.
So for like $4. So and I did buy, now I will say they are not the quality of the ones that you can get from Scenic Express that are on that little strip and cost $30 a piece.
Martin, what's his name?
Yeah, Martin, yeah, Wilbur. But for $3, not a bad gig. My scenery philosophy is layers. So the main problem that I see with a lot of people when they do scenery is they go down, they buy, because they go to the model railroad section, they go to the Woodland Scenics thing, and they grab Woodland Scenics brown and Woodland Scenics green, and they go back and they go, this is a brown road and this is green grass. And you have the nice green patch over here, the nice brown patch over there. If you go spend 10 minutes out in the world, you will realize that that is not the way nature is. And you want to have subtle texture changes and material changes and layers. If you go out in the forest, even though there's nothing growing under the trees, there's all that deadfall. There's sticks and there's rocks and there's pine needles. If you go into the Oregon rainforest, I mean, you can't walk through the darn stuff because the underbrush is so thick. But it's not just all one shade of green, it's various shades of green, broadleaf plants, small leaf plants, things that will poke you. There's all sorts of different things that make you itch, things like that. So you've got to layer your stuff. So I do, I'm not saying Woodland Scenics is bad, but by itself, for me, the colors are, they're not blending enough. So I like to buy, I spend quite a bit of money. If I'm going to spend money at the hobby shop or ordering stuff, it's like scenery supplies. And I'll buy different companies' static grass. And it's like red. What color is red? And it's like this company has a red, and this company has a red, and this company has a red. So I'll buy different shades of, they'll have autumn leaf. Okay, well, that's orange autumn leaf, and this one's a brown autumn leaf. This one's bright red, and this one's bright green. And when you get all of them together and you start mixing them, that's when you get those natural hues. For model railroading, you want the scenery to look good, but you don't want to be able to like pick out the materials, like walking, oh, cool, I see that you use Woodland Scenics number T83 for your field here, like that's, which I've seen. So my goal is to people go sit there and stare at it and go, well, who makes that? And me having to go, well, so these are 3 or 4 different companies, and this is something I came up with, and this is something else. And so that's always mine. So any other questions? I invite you guys to come up here and look at the finished product on these. You kind of see how they come out when they're done. And then if you got anything else, just hit me up.
See, what are you doing next weekend? I'm over my way out and see it called. I'm not that far along.
Yeah, I don't think you've even got a color down.
No, let's track them. So that's a wireframe with medium paste. Marty McGurk used it. So it's wire tree, golden paste, and then it's
Oh, that would be another one. Yeah.
polyfiber. So you can sitting around. Spray painted brown. So spray brown and everything brown. and then I dry brush it with grays. And then
Oh,
this
wow.
is,
Hey, where did you find that at? Those are
Knockings. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I was like, I don't know which company did I use, okay, yeah. So, yeah, and this one is super tree armature into a wire.
Did any of the models go with different?
So I like, tried it.
Bell used to have a kit, and Jeff was telling me he saw something on.
Yeah, they're good for, they're really good, but they're, I find them to be repetitive sometimes. Like they're sort of one style of tree. So like, I like this, I like this is how trees are. Yeah, trees look like
Because it
this.
seemed like over the
Like this,
years.
and I've got some that are the Scenic
Model
Express,
people
lead
got around
material,
all
they're
the exotic,
different.
well,
And that's
no
so
sure aircraft.
canopy should be, you know,
I actually said.
like I always laugh at the whole Scenic Forest canopy. Have whatever you want as long as it's light green. Yes.
So the main stuff, that they're made.
Yeah, it's all that stuff. Yeah.
Mile or.
And this is mixed up.
He said.
So this one I embedded some of these in.
That's the last I heard.
Because
And this one.
they had a bunch of.
Oh, did the same thing. And then this is the big stuff too. And then I use the gloss or, you know, the top. Everyone to see what.
Yeah.
it is.
But then they have hundreds of things.
This was.
Or not.
I forget the exact number. but-
That's a, yeah, there's a problem.
Oh, what? No, it wasn't that many.
No.
Oh, okay.
Chunk of government is picking up the
But they were long lives.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, they first knew in 1979 and you were out of
Water, I started using
by 1993.
or not having magic
But
effects.
then the
Stuff you have
yard
out there.
times bought
$34 stuff.
one.
Um,
And guys like Paul Powell.
simply because
Used them as test beds.
I don't have enough for like
So there's
products.
still a few ones, but not many.
There's a lot of
No, but
experience.
the military had them for 30-some years.
And it specifically says deep applications, you do it in 3 millimeter. It's working pretty well in a swimming.
Yeah.
It's 30-some years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's.
They
Have a neighbor.
don't have 20. And then they had.
Yes, Envirotex. Yeah, and the Envirotex,
But
it's,
the Army. for
what I
some
like
reason,
about the Magic.
They didn't publish that.
It's a model railroad design, yeah.
Intelligence.
It's a model railroad design. It's like it's one model. He was tired of all these different, like the Envirotex, you know, is awful, it's not good for you, it eats the foam. It's thinner, it's actually like the viscosity is thinner than the Magic water. So it will find, it's thinner than water, so it will find absolutely every imperfection in your layout. Which is great if you're looking for every imperfection in your layout, but awful if you are trying to pour it. And then you'll pour it and it'll look great, you'll come back in 3 hours, you've lost a bunch, and you're not sure if it's gone up into the scenery or it's gone, you know, underneath the scenery. Or...
The first instructions for this stuff from Deluxe Materials is first use a thin layer of this to seal everything.
Yeah.
Well, that's the slurry, so the one thing,
It's definitely thick.
the one thing I learned was the Hydrocal slurry. So you mix it a little bit wet and you literally just pour it into whatever you're gonna work on and spread it out. I've used like a trowel to move this stuff around. And it'll find all the little cracks. You gotta be under layout, looking where it's starting to drip through, so you can put tape under there or whatever it is. But it's a lot better to do it that way than pouring your water, and watching it dribble through all.
There's Ismo around the table.
Yeah.
Okay, so how about the announcement of
Yeah.
the, be careful what you ask for. You made that. And I just realized this microphone has not actually been working this whole time. So I'm going to
Take off. We did the box building contest or the shell contest. Jeff's still working on his, we're waiting for his submission. So what we've decided to do is we have all of these kits that were donated. We're gonna do a competition. You can grab 1, 2, 6, 12, I don't care. As many as you think you need of these kits, either the Athearn, there's a couple of Roundhouse, I think there's some others. There's some more stuff down below too. Not only are there freight cars, but there's some containers and some vehicles and whatnot. And we want you to build anything you want with it. I don't care what it is. If you want to build a drive-in movie theater, if you want to build a spaceship, don't care. But I want everybody to grab at least 1 or 2 of them, and we're gonna come back in November for the November week. So I will bring, or someone will bring the kits again in October for everybody to go through. So if we have some more participants to grab some kits and build these. Be creative, have some fun with it. I think we're gonna have some prizes.
We'll come up with something.
We'll come up with something shiny, shiny objects, something you can go take to a hobby shop and spend. So it costs you nothing but your time and some paint and whatever creativity you want to spend on it. So we encourage everybody to participate. I'm gonna bring a couple of things home. I have my daughter put 1 or 2 together. So if she does better than you, we'll be very knowledgeable. So please look through all the stuff over there. I think we've got the room for another 10-15 minutes, and then we'll pack everything up and get out of here. So any questions on the contest?
Question is, you just have to use the kit, it doesn't have to be built.
It doesn't have to be built. I don't care if you can use the cardboard box. I'll give you points if you use the cardboard box of it.
I mean, what you got? You got a box card there.
There's a box car, caboose.
So
Like I
that
said,
could
there's.
be a tool shed.
This could be a coffee shop. Whatever you want. There's also a number of containers, like the 40-foot containers. There's some trucks, some Mack trucks and some containers and whatnot. So you could build yourself a whole shipping terminal, or I don't know, there's no size limit. There's nothing. You just have to grab at least 2 or 3 of those blue boxes over there. And get creative. I want make one of these narrow gauge. Make it a promo demonstration car for O scale. Yeah. So that's all I've got. Jeff, do you have anything else?
I don't. Does anybody have anything for the beat?
Did we hand out raffle tickets to?
We did not. Did anybody actually grab like tickets to the raffle?
No,
Oh,
no.
you have it all very fast.
What?
So we'll just have to have.
Yeah, come over here.
There you go.
Take 2 of them out.
Stan, tear out a ticket, give me 1/2 of it.
All these.
Whatever you want. This is decorated, put the bay window, put this in there. I mean, next time you do it.
Yep.
So what are you raffling off, Jeff? We have some envelopes over here. These are the, obviously.
So the person who picked those up, how much did it cost him actually to pick them up? More.
Well, I guess there's more.
I mean, how many cars did he buy?
You know, when I was stopped up in Ron, they were busy boarding up the whole window, and somebody broke in and not the floor.
Oh, no.
Well, the crazy thing is that they had some Indians sitting on boxes, stole the boxes, but they were empty.
Right? So how much longer before Ron moves out of there?
You know, I admire him for speaking, I hope.
All right. I think he's getting a hell of a deal too on.
Yeah. So.
Violet, can you come up here?
You gotta say please.
While you're in here, I figure you're closest to neutral.
Close your eyes, reach in there. We'll take it out.
We're gonna start with the low ones first.
The last three. 0, 7, 1.
Oh, gosh, it's been.
Started right off.
That's right, I still need to send a check for you.
That almost covers gas there.
Another one?
Yeah.
Pull another one out. Gonna be 0, 7, 4. Hey, that's me. Keep digging.
Yeah, the way it's set up, pretty much everybody here. You know, when,
And 0, 7, 2.
I'll accept this one.
Keep digging. So we run out of envelopes. 0, 6, 8.
That one's mine.
Hey, there you go.
It's good because I'm going there after this.
Still open?
I have a Blunami. It's blowing up speakers.
Yeah,
So I need to see if it still works.
69. Yep, there you go.
There you go. For your project.
Dig in there.
Those of you who haven't won yet should be getting excited.
Ready? 70.
I think that's what, 25?
Yeah, 2 more.
Do we even have 2 more?
73.
Yo. This is only one left. So that must be yours.
Everybody, or is it down to Greg and Stan?
And Stan, I believe it's yours. 75. There you go.
$50.
Thank you.
And with that, the meeting is adjourned.